Hi guys, so today's video is going to look at doing a little bit of revision on the poetry of Eavan Boland, a wonderful Irish poet who sadly passed away quite recently. So the poems that we're going to look at in this video are Child of Our Time, Love, This Moment, The Famine Road, The War Horse and Outside History. Okay, now before we go into looking at the poems in details, just give a bit of a background on the exams. So the two most recent times that Boland came up on the exam was in 2017 and then back in 2011. So the 2017 question that came up was: Boland makes effective use of symbols and metaphors to explore personal experiences and deliver penetrating truths about society. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Support your answer with reference to the poetry of Eavan Boland on your course. And then the 2011 question was: Boland's reflective insights are expressed through her precise use of language. Write your response to the statement, supporting your answer with suitable reference to poetry on your course. Okay, so when we are looking at these exam questions, the first thing we want to do is try and pick out keywords, try and figure out what exactly the question is asking us to look at. So if we look at 2017, Boland makes effective use of symbols and metaphors. That's the techniques that we're being asked to use. So they are being asked to comment on. So they are the keywords, first keywords that we see. To explore personal experiences. Alright, personal experiences are our next key thing. We must connect the symbols and metaphors to our personal experiences and deliver penetrating truths about society. Okay, so again, this is our next keyword. We need to comment not just about on personal experiences, but also on how her symbols and metaphors deliver penetrating truths about society. Okay, and then to what extent do you agree or disagree? So you choose whether you agree or disagree, and then you support with reference to her poetry on the course. In 2011 then, Boland's reflective insights. Okay, so reflective insights into her personal life or insights into society that reflect upon what's going on, maybe upon our own emotions, or reflect upon the state of society or the world at the time, are expressed through her precise use of language. So this one, if you compare it across, in terms of reflective insights, that's quite similar to the idea of personal experiences and penetrating truths about society. Reflective insights is quite a similar idea. Here, however, instead of being told symbols and metaphors, okay, we're getting to precise use of language. Okay? So we might still comment on symbols and metaphors, but there's a bit more of an open, we're a bit more open to interpret different aspects of our language here as well. And then write your response to the statement supporting your answer with suitable reference, as we are always told to do. So we want to keep these kind of ideas in mind as we go through different poems, and we'll come back to these two questions at the end and just see how we can link some of the poems into them. Okay, so the first poem that we're going to look at is probably one of the most popular poems by Boland on the course, and it's Child of Our Time. So a reminder, so this poem was inspired by the bombings on 17th of May 1974. Boland critiques the violence of the times and especially its effect on children, and we are all collectively to blame for the effects that this kind of violence has on the children of the time. Okay, so the themes that we come up with here, it's a public and a political poem. It's very much making a comment on society and making a comment on the effects of the Troubles upon innocent people. We are looking at ideas about childhood and learning, and the loss of innocence and the loss of childhood and the loss of learning, that the things that the child never gets to experience or learn. And then we also have commentary on violence. Okay, and there's lots of violence in numerous poems by Boland. So we see commentary on violence in War Horse. We see it also in Famine Road. Okay, we need to keep that as a theme that is prevalent in Irish history and therefore comes into Boland's poetry quite a lot. In imagery, the images we see that stand out are the lack of comfort. Okay, so we talk about quotations like "knew no lullaby," right? The lack of innocence and the comfort that's stolen from the child. We have the images of childhood that the child will not get to experience. Okay, so we have lots of different images of stereotypical things we would connect with childhood, and that is to kind of emphasize what the child who has died is going to be missing out on. And this idea of the robbed cradle, very, very strong image coming from the poem. In terms of poetic features then in language, we have the inclusive pronouns. So we are all to blame, it's collective responsibility, and she includes herself within that. We have the juxtaposition between the innocence of childhood and the harshness of war. There's a lot of musical symbolism, think about that lullaby. We have a bit of listing going on, we have the lists of different childhood aspects of childhood the child missed out on, and some use of caesura just to create a pause and allow us to reflect. So we can connect that back to reflective insights. Not only is she having reflective insights, she is trying to inspire reflective insights in her audience. Okay, so key quotations, thing that students always want to know about. What quotations can I use? And some quotations we might take from Child of Our Time. As we start down the bottom left, it's rhythm from the discord of your murder. There we have that musical imagery, okay? We have the juxtaposition, how can rhythm come from discord, alright? In the purple then we have its motive from the fact you cannot listen, alright? There's the lacking, okay, what's being stolen from the child, you cannot listen. We who should have known how to instruct, we have our inclusive pronoun there, we're all involved in this. And then finally, child of our time, our times have robbed your cradle. That we are the robbed cradle child. This is one who is lost, the innocent, who has had its life stolen away from it. Moving on then, the next poem we're going to look at is Love. So love, in this poem, Boland examines the evolving relationship of love between herself and her husband. She draws on imagery from Greek mythology and explores difficult personal memories. So this is very much a personal experience poem. When thinking back to those exam questions, very, very personal poem. And she looks in detail and explores a relationship with her husband. Some of the themes, family, very, very important here, also very important in this moment. Okay, we want to see family is quite prevalent in Boland's poetry. The idea of love, I mean, that's kind of self-evident from the title of the poem. Idea of memory, okay, the memory she has, right, and the kind of individual moments and their importance and how they stand out to us. And then this idea of distance and separation and the movement of a relationship. It's almost somewhat similar to Nessa by Paul Durkin, where you can see the evolving relationship between him and his wife. Imagery, we have the idea of the bridge. You have the image of the husband standing on the bridge. There's the dusk, and then there's that walking away at the end. Poetic features, we have allusion to the Greek myths going on here, so you need to be able to comment on that. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about there, go and look at the detailed video on this poem. We have short sentences. We have that I am your wife. Okay, really stands out in the middle of the poem. She is definitive, she is not giving up on their relationship. And we have a bit of personification going on throughout the poem as well. The key quotations from this poem: dusk has hidden the bridge in the river. Okay, we have that image of dusk and we have the bridge over the turbulent times of their relationship. We had 2 infant children, one of whom was touched by death. This is very, very personal to Boland. Okay, she's talking about a very difficult time in her own life when her child was very, very sick. I am your wife. It was years ago. There's our short sentences, and they will really stand out from this poem. You know, they're probably some of the strongest lines within this whole poem. And will we ever live so intensely again? That questioning and that longing with the change in the relationship, you know, this kind of mystery within the relationship of where it's going to go. But also there's definitely a sense of love and still caring within there. This moment then, okay, is a very, very beautiful poem by Boland. It's being very, very popularly shared at the moment because of its beauty. So in this poem, Boland recalls a treasured memory of her child running into her arms. She appreciates the need for the child to grow up, but struggles, as nearly all parents do, with letting go. Okay, so the themes there, again we have family, again we have change and the changing relationships, and how difficult changing relationships can be for people to accept, you know, to move from what we're used to in a relationship into a new dynamic in a relationship. There's the growth of the child, okay, and we have a sense of connection. And Boland also has a sense of connection with the past, which we'll see in a number of poems, particularly Famine Road, but this connection with her own child is coming up here. We have the imagery again of dusk. Okay, so dusk can be a symbol that we could talk about in terms of answering that question about symbols and metaphors. We have the child running to parents, beautiful imagery really comes across, and then we have the fruit sweetening in the dark, very much a prevalent image coming out here. Okay, and you may want to link that across to, if you studied pomegranate, you could link there into that. Poetic features, we have colour imagery, we have the one window is yellow as butter, we have a lot of symbolism, and we have the allusion to the myth of Persephone, of Ceres and Persephone, and this is the same myth that came up in Bavarian Gentians. So it's the myth of the child being stolen from the parent and only getting to come back for short times, and that linking to the seasons. So remember, Persephone is stolen by Pluto, brought down to the underworld, but comes back in spring and summer, and that's why the world grows, and then it's taken during autumn and winter, and that's why the world's dying. Make sure you're aware of that particular myth. Okay, it's very, very important to a number of poems on the course this year. In terms of quotations, the quotations here are quite short because the lines in the poem tend to be quite short. We have a neighbourhood at dusk, right? And we have the indefinite pronoun there being very much important to make this poem more universally relatable. We have this symbolism of dusk coming up again, and Ryan's slanting around fruit. So we have natural imagery and the protection coming across there. One tree is black, one window is yellow as butter. Okay, comfort versus mystery, comfort versus danger, and we have that colour imagery in there. And then finally, apples sweeten in the dark, back to our imagery of fruit, really, really important coming across in this poem. The next one we're going to look at then is the Famine Road. Somewhat of a complex poem in terms of how it is structurally laid out, but once we get into it, there's a huge amount of depth to this poem. So the poem follows two different storylines in alternate stanzas. The first plot tells us about the mistreatment of the Irish by the British authorities during the time of the famine. So the Irish were out building the famine roads and how they were being treated. The second follows a discussion of a woman being told by a doctor that she's unable to have children. And the poet draws clear parallels between these situations. These situations that seem completely different. She expertly draws them together and gives us a huge insight into the commonalities of maybe suffering and difficulties in life across time. In terms of themes, mistreatment comes up here. So it's the mistreatment of the Irish people during the famine, but then there's also the mistreatment of how the woman is treated by the doctor. We have the idea of nationality and history, and we know her Irish nationality and connection with Irish history is very, very important to Boland. And then we also have the idea of misogyny and how the woman is being mistreated by the doctor who is supposed to be caring for her, and how brutal and cruel he is in the way he speaks to her. The imagery that comes across is probably the most strong image here is the dying Irishman who has to be avoided. He's a typhoid pariah, and that his relatives don't come to look after him. So just a quote about the no more than snow will attend its own flakes while they melt, will they sit by his death rattle, so that he is being abandoned, and how the narrator judges the Irish people for this but doesn't really appreciate the context in which they are living. There's the cruel and detached individuals in important roles, and this is the connection that we need to be able to draw between these two stories. We have the cruel Jones looking at the Irish during the famine, and then we have the cruel doctor who doesn't show care for the woman as he tells her just devastating news. We also have the idea of blood comes up a number of times, so you should look for that in there. There's a lot of symbolism to blood and the importance of blood and the colour imagery. In terms of poetic features, you must be able to talk about the structure of stanzas to draw parallels here. Hugely important in this poem. We have colour imagery, comes up repeatedly. We have direct speech, and very much an emotionless tone, connecting over to those two men in those powerful positions, not having an emotional connection and being quite cruel. Key quotations then from the Famine Road that we might want to look at. So there's quite a lot here because it is quite a complex poem. So the first one we start down the bottom left, their bones need toil, and this is connecting to the idea of how the Irish were treated and the historical view of the British authorities, or the English authorities. British authorities, actually, I should say, sorry. After all, could they not blood their knuckles on rock? The cruelty in that image. Okay? And we have the blood symbolism coming in there. They know it and walk clear. He has become a typhoid pariah. His blood painted. Again, we have the blood coming up, and that's probably the strongest image in this, is the abandonment of that person and the judgment from Jones against the Irish people who are forced to abandon them, and the lack of empathy towards those people and the difficulty they must have experienced in having to do that. No more than snow attends its own flakes, where they settle and melt will they pray by his death rattle. Linking back into that typhoid pariah, you have the snow with the white there versus the blood in the red. Take it well, woman, grow your garden, keep house, goodbye. Think about you need to look at the structure there, the use of the commas, and just the bluntness in the way he is speaking. And what is your body now, if not a famine road? And this seems to be more the woman in the poem speaking to herself, but the judgment, the way she judges herself because of expectations on women at the time and what they were expected, the role she expected to fulfill in her life. The war horse then. So the war horse tells the story of a horse passing through the street in which the poet lives. The horse destroys everything as it passes through, but nobody intervenes, and this is really important in the poem, that nobody intervenes. The horse here can be read as a metaphor for war and destruction, and Boland can be seen to criticise the inactivity of society in stopping the atrocities of war and violence. So there is a huge amount of critique in this, looking back at that first 2007 question of public critique. That's what we're going for in this poem, very much so. But there's also the fact that she puts herself within it. There's connection of the public and personal. The themes we're going to come up with here is politics. Okay, her politics about the violence and the war, very much a poem connected back to Child of Our Time. We have war and violence coming up, connections there with Famine Road and Child of Our Time again, obviously. We have nationality and history again, and we have a social critique. So you can see those themes coming up over and over again, and the connection of the public and private for Boland. The imagery, obviously the horse is a very strong image, the horse itself. We have the flowers of the rose and the crocus, these beautiful things that are being destroyed, and then thinking about what those flowers might represent themselves. We have death is very strong here. Okay? And death comes across, and we've already seen in a number of poems. We've seen it in Famine Road, we have seen it in Child of Our Time. And then our poetic features we might look at. Our onomatopoeia comes up, we have rhyming couplets. Why is she using those rhyming couplets? We have a military type of language, makes things very, very harsh. The sibilance, and what is that sibilance representing? What does sibilance usually represent? Is it that kind of sinisterness? And we have the extended metaphor of what the horse represents. And again, go back to that video on the war horse if you're not sure about the multitude of many different metaphors that could be interpreted from the horse. In terms of quotations, we have the clip, clop, casual iron of his shoes as he stamps death. Think about the harshness of those sounds there. If a rose, a hedge, a crocus are uprooted, like corpses, remote, crushed, mutilated. Right? Think if you listen to the sounds within this poem, through that alliteration and the sibilance that she uses, it's very, very harsh. Really, really kind of vicious sounds. Okay? And that is what war is. War is a harsh and vicious reality. Neighbours use the subterfuge of curtains. But she brings herself into this as well. She's commenting on the neighbours hiding behind the curtains, but she doesn't intervene as well. So again, we have collective responsibility coming up and the social critique. And then recalling days of burned countryside, illicit raid. This is something that has been part of Irish history for many, many years, and she's perhaps critiquing why we are repeating the cycles of history. But it also connects into the idea of her national identity. Then finally, the last poem, just to run through quickly, is Outside History. So Outside History, this poem highlights the fact that many people have been ignored and left out of history. The poet uses imagery of stars to represent the past. She speaks of the darkness as a force of its own, possibly resembling those whose history has not been recorded, but is nonetheless still important. So what she's getting at there in terms of that darkness is that just because something hasn't been written about doesn't mean it doesn't exist within its own right. It's not that the light needs to be shined on it. It is still, even though it's not celebrated, it is still having a huge effect. Okay, so it's in the darkness because it's not being celebrated, but it's still a force, it still is shaping the world. Okay? In terms of themes here, history and nationality coming up again. Okay, so we're seeing that theme coming up over and over in our poems. Right? We have the role of women, so we can link this over to, linking it to Famine Road, in the second storyline within Famine Road, and the concept of struggle. Okay, it's linking maybe to the struggles within this moment or the struggles within love. Imagery doesn't, it's quite a short poem again. So the two images that really stand out here are the stars and the darkness. Okay, it's not a huge, not a huge amount of imagery. It's really just focusing a lot on those two images. And then poetic features, there's a number of metaphors coming across here. We have the symbolism of those stars, and again we have the merging of the personal and the public. Okay, hugely important feature of Boland's work that we need to be able to talk about in the exam. In terms of quotations, there are outsiders always, right? Making this a universally applicable idea. They have always been outside history. Okay, so very, very similar quotations, but there's that repetition of the idea that you need to be able to comment on. Okay, and they have always been giving us specific peoples. This is something that when she says they're outsiders, always it could be more general. There's always been someone, but now it's saying to some people, there's certain groups that have always been pushed out. So showing that this is maybe disproportionately affecting certain people. I moved to be part of that ordeal. She's trying to take responsibility. She's trying to be saying personally, I will try to make a difference. And how slowly they die. That these issues are very long lasting. It's not something that can be easily dealt with. It's something that has to take a long time. It's going to take a long time to correct. So, looking then finally back at those two questions we talked about at the start. We have 2017, we talked about symbols and metaphors, personal experience, penetrating truths about society, and then we have 2011, reflective insights, precise use of language. So, we took it 2017 first. The first poem I bring up here is the war horse, and that is the metaphor and symbolism of what the horse represents, her personal experience in being someone who's watching it but not intervening, and the penetrating truths about society, that society is allowing the war and the violence to continue. We have the Famine Road, very, very similar, in that we have the symbolism and through the connection of the treatment of women and the treatment of the Irish. Okay? Personal experience, her own personal connection with Irish history, and perhaps a connection as a woman through to the experiences of the woman within the poem, and the penetrating truths in that perhaps now as a society are we just as bad as treating people just as poorly as maybe we were treated in the past during the famine. We have outside history, right, with the symbolism, metaphors of the stars and the darkness, personal experiences as a woman who feels that the women have definitely been left out and disproportionately represented in history. And then we have the penetrating truths about society and its effect and treatment of women. We have Child of Our Time. We have the symbolism and metaphors around the imagery of the childhood's innocence, the personal experience in her connection, both as an Irish person living through the time of troubles, and there is that for Angus dedication in the poem that she brings, the sense of loss is very personal to her. And we've penetrating truths about society, again, that we are allowing violence and these terrible actions to happen. Finally then, this moment, we have the symbolism of the fruit, we have the symbolism of the colour imagery, the personal experience in that, it's her personal emotions about her relationship of letting her child go, and then penetrating truths about society, perhaps that it's our fear of the dark, of what's out there, and looking at the movement, how people grow up and the world that they're growing up into. Then finally we have the 2011 exam paper, and the poems we might look at here, reflective insight. She's very much reflecting on her relationship with her husband and precise use of language. There's very clear imagery. We have the Amish table, we have the I'm your wife, it was years ago, the strength of those short sentences, and we have the imagery of the allusion to Greek mythology, and we have the bridge. A number of really precise things going on in there. Reflective insights then, we also have in this moment where she reflects upon her relationship with her child and the effect of that key imagery of the window and the tree and the fruit coming up. We have reflective insights in Warhorse. She reflects upon her inactivity, or should I say, towards the violence of the world, and precise use of language when she looks at details of what's being destroyed, the rose, the crocus, all of those very small details she really goes into. Child of Our Time, the reflection on our collective responsibility for the violence and the innocent children that are being hurt by it, and with precise use of language, through that listing perhaps we can talk about there of the things the child is going to miss out on. And finally, we might bring in outside history here, reflecting upon how society and the world has left out and mistreated and misrepresented different groups, and then precise use of language, the talking about the darkness and the how the darkness and the stars are treated differently, but not allowing us to fall into maybe the standard roles of saying darkness is passive, that darkness she sees as still being quiet.